My name is Claire and I am 29 years old. I married at 24. My husband's name is Ethan. He was 27 when we said our vows. Everyone remarked on what a perfect couple we made. Our wedding day was filled with smiles and joyful congratulations. My parents were beaming with pride. His parents showered us with gifts. After the wedding, we settled into a small, charming house. I poured my heart into every room, decorating each space with love, wanting to build a true sanctuary for us. In the beginning, life was idyllic. Ethan worked at a bank and I took care of our home. My days were spent cooking, cleaning, and eagerly awaiting his return each evening. He would come home with a smile, sometimes carrying a small bouquet of flowers. We would watch movies together, our shoulders touching on the sofa. Over dinner, we would talk about our days. I was convinced this was love. I believed it would last an eternity. But after the first year, a subtle shift began. Ethan started coming home later. His excuse was always work, but he carried a weariness that felt cold and distant. The flowers stopped. Our conversations grew shorter. When I asked him if something was wrong, he would brush it off, saying it was nothing. His phone became his constant companion, his eyes fixed on its screen more often than on me. He no longer pulled me close on the sofa or hugged me the way he used to. One evening, I glanced at his phone and saw a message from another woman. She had called him love. A tremor ran through my hands, and my legs felt too weak to hold me. I waited for him to come home, my heart pounding with dread. When I confronted him, his face hardened with anger. He yelled that I had no right to touch his phone. He insisted it was nothing, that she was just a friend. I cried myself to sleep that night. But the next morning, I made his tea just as I always did. I cooked breakfast. I wanted to erase the message from my mind. I wanted desperately to believe him. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was truly nothing. I was terrified of losing him, of our marriage falling apart. Months drifted by, but Ethan remained unchanged. He was still late, still secretive with his phone. I would catch glimpses of unfamiliar names on his screen. When I dared to ask, he would erupt in anger, accusing me of not trusting him, of making his life difficult. So I fell silent. I stopped asking questions. My friends urged me to leave him. They told me I deserved happiness, but I refused to listen. I clung to the hope that he would change, that he would remember the love we once shared. I thought one day he would wake up, feel remorse, and come back to me. So I waited. I hoped. I cried alone in the kitchen, night after night. Then came the day I found a photo. It was him with another woman on a beach. He was smiling. A wide, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. A wave of nausea washed over me. When I showed him the picture, he laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh. He claimed it was an old photo, that it meant nothing. He said I was overthinking everything. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a chaotic storm of confusion and pain. But in the morning, I made breakfast. I cleaned the house. I waited for him to come home. I whispered the same old lie to myself. Maybe he will change. Maybe next month will be better. Occasionally, he would be kind. He would bring home a slice of my favorite cake. He would kiss my forehead and apologize, blaming his mood on stress from work. He'd say he was just tired, not angry. And like a fool, I would believe him every time. I would forgive him. A single soft word from him was enough to make me happy. But the peace never lasted. Each time I rebuilt my trust, he would shatter it again. There was always another message, another woman, another lie. I cried and cried, yet I stayed. I still made his tea every morning. I still washed his clothes and cleaned his shoes. I still waited by the door for him. People say time heals all wounds, but for me, time only exposed the depth of my blindness. It counted the number of times I forgave him, the number of times I lied to myself. I kept this pain hidden from my parents. When they called, I would put on a cheerful voice and tell them everything was wonderful. I didn't want them to worry. One evening, he didn't come home at all. I waited until midnight, then started calling his phone. It went straight to voicemail, again and again. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window all night, watching the empty street, my heart sinking with every car that passed but wasn't his. He walked in the next morning without a trace of shame. He mumbled something about being with a friend. He looked tired but not the least bit sorry. I asked him again, "Where were you?" He ignored me, walking straight to the bathroom and then to bed. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the wall. An immense exhaustion settled over me. My hands felt raw from washing dishes. My eyes were perpetually red from crying, and my mind was heavy with pain, yet my lips remained sealed. I wanted to scream, to demand why he kept hurting me, but I didn't. I just picked up his discarded shirt from the floor and folded it neatly. He slept soundly while I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space beside me, wondering how I had become this person. A woman who waited, who cried in silence, who poured her love into a man who was incapable of returning it. A few weeks later, I saw him near our house. He was in a car with another woman. They were laughing together. They didn't see me standing behind a tree, watching them. In that moment, I felt like a stranger in my own life. My heart didn't break this time. It just went still and quiet. I turned around and walked home. There were no tears that day. I just cleaned the floors, folded the laundry, and made dinner. That night, he came home late again, holding a bottle of perfume as a gift. He smiled and kissed my cheek. I said nothing. I placed the perfume on the table and served his food. He didn't thank me. He rarely did. I watched him eat, studying his hands, his face, his cold, empty eyes. I no longer saw the man I had married. I saw a stranger I couldn't trust. And still, I stayed. I don't know why I kept hoping. Maybe I believed that love meant enduring. Maybe I thought that leaving was a sign of failure. Or maybe I was simply terrified of starting over. So I stayed, even when the loneliness was suffocating, even when I was invisible to him in our own home. As I tell this, I wonder if anyone out there has felt this specific kind of quiet desperation. Knowing I'm not alone in this feeling gives me the strength to continue. One morning, I opened the closet and saw his shirt, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne. I held it for a moment, then folded it slowly. I didn't understand why I continued to care for his things. Maybe it was just a habit, a way to feel useful when I felt so useless. Ethan was kind only when he wanted something. If he needed me to do something for him, his voice would become sweet. If he was craving a good meal, he would shower me with compliments. But as soon as he got what he wanted, he would retreat back into his cold shell. His words would become sharp, his expression vacant. It was like living with two different people, and I never knew which one would greet me each day. One weekend, we were invited to a friend's wedding. I wore a blue dress and he wore a crisp white shirt. In the mirror, we looked like the perfect, happy couple. But the silence in the car was heavy and suffocating. He stared out the window the entire time. I tried to start a conversation, asking about the wedding, but his replies were clipped and short. I eventually gave up. At the reception, he put on a performance for everyone else. He laughed with his friends. He even danced with a woman I didn't recognize. I sat alone at our table, pretending not to care, a polite smile fixed on my face. When people asked if I was okay, I said I was just tired. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted the night to be over. When we finally got home, I asked him, "Do you still want to be in this marriage?" He didn't even look at me. "Don't start now, Claire. I'm tired," he said before disappearing into the bedroom. I sat in the dark living room for hours, replaying the years I had given him. I thought about all the times I had waited by the door, hoping for a simple smile. I thought about the countless nights I had cried myself to sleep, and yet I had stayed. Some days I told myself I was strong and patient, that staying was the honorable thing to do. But deep down, I was shattering. It wasn't one big blow, but 1,000 tiny cuts. Every lie, every silent dinner, every cold glance chipped away at my soul. Ethan never once asked how I felt. He never noticed if I was sick or exhausted. I remember having a high fever once. I still managed to cook dinner. He ate in his usual silence, not even noticing my flushed face or trembling hands. Watching him from across the table, I felt myself fading away. One afternoon, I visited my mother. She commented on how thin I'd become and asked if everything was all right. I forced a smile and lied, telling her that Ethan was just busy with work and stressed. She believed me. Mothers want to believe their daughters are happy. At home, the routine continued. He came and went as he pleased, hiding his phone, offering no explanations. I yearned to talk, but he always shut me down, accusing me of complaining or creating problems. So I learned to swallow my words. One evening, I cooked his favorite meal, hoping for a peaceful dinner. I waited and waited. He never came. My calls went unanswered. The food grew cold on the table. I didn't eat. I just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me. He finally walked in around midnight, smelling of a woman's perfume. He offered no apology, no explanation. He just said, "I'm tired. Don't ask questions," and walked past me as if I were a piece of furniture. I cleaned the kitchen and packed the leftovers away. I didn't cry that night. I just felt a profound emptiness. My body moved on autopilot, a ghost in my own home. One day, his wallet was lying open on the table. Tucked inside was a photo of a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, pretty, and smiling brightly. I stared at it for a long time before carefully putting it back. I didn't confront him. I couldn't bear to hear another lie. I began to spend more time by myself. I took long walks, sat on park benches, and watched the world go by. I avoided people, not wanting to face their questions, not knowing how to explain why I stayed, not even to myself. The thought of leaving flickered in my mind. I would imagine packing a bag and going back to my parents' house. But then I would think of our wedding photos, of the life we were supposed to build, of the promises we made. And so I stayed. One night I found him sitting on the sofa in the dark, looking completely lost. I sat beside him and gently asked, "What's wrong?" He turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and asked, "Do you still love me?" I hesitated. A flood of memories washed over me. The lies, the silence, the pain. And yet my mouth formed the word, "Yes." He didn't respond. He just got up and went to bed, leaving me alone with the weight of my answer. I hated how quickly I had said yes. I hated that I still loved a man who gave me nothing in return. But I couldn't seem to stop myself from making the same mistake. Days turned into weeks. Nothing changed. We were strangers sharing a roof. He spoke to me only when he needed something. His moods swung between brief moments of sweetness and long stretches of silent indifference. I started waking up before dawn. I would make tea and sit on the balcony alone, watching the city come to life. I felt numb. My heart no longer expected anything from him. I didn't wait for love or hope for change. I thought that perhaps this was just my life now. I had become one of those women who stay, holding on to a promise that was broken long ago, and I hadn't even noticed it happening. Then one morning, I opened the front door to get the newspaper and found a small envelope on the doormat. It was addressed to Ethan. I handed it to him. A small, strange smile touched his lips as he looked at it. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing important," he replied before taking it into the bedroom. But something in my gut told me it was very important. I didn't trust that smile. Later that week, his phone rang. He answered it and immediately walked outside. I watched him from the window. He was laughing, looking happier than I had seen him in years. I stood hidden behind the curtain, a shadow in my own home. That night, I waited until he was sound asleep. With cold hands and a slow, steady breath, I took his phone. I didn't want to see the truth, but I already knew it was there. He had saved her number under the initial R. I opened their chat history. They had been talking for months, sending photos, making plans, saying, "I miss you." They had even talked about going away together. I read every single word. My head felt heavy, but this time my hands did not shake. I was too tired for shock. I placed the phone back on the nightstand. I didn't wake him. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the familiar wall, the wall that had witnessed so many of my silent tears. But this time was different. This time I knew my silence had to end. The next day I made lunch and waited for him to sit down. Then I looked him directly in the eye and asked, "Do you love her?" He looked startled but said nothing. I asked again, my voice steady, "Do you love her?" He put his spoon down. "I don't want to talk about this," he said. "Then I will talk," I replied. "I saw your messages. I know everything." He glanced at me for a moment before looking away. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he muttered. "It just happened." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "You always say that, it just happens, and I always stay. I clean up your mess, I forgive you, and I believe you'll change, but you never do, and maybe I'm the one who never learns." He had no reply, no apology. He just sat there, staring at the table. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I opened my closet and looked at my clothes, my shoes, my small box of personal things. I asked myself, what do I really need? I packed one small bag, just enough for a few days. As I walked out of the house, he didn't try to stop me. He didn't even ask where I was going. I went to my parents' house. When my mother opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask a single question. She just pulled me into a tight hug. And for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not from weakness, but from the sheer exhaustion of being strong for too long. I stayed there for 3 days. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to hear his excuses or fall back into the same toxic cycle. I needed to breathe. On the 4th day, Ethan called. I ignored it. He sent a text, "Come home, we can fix this." I stared at the words, but my fingers didn't move to reply. I closed my phone and joined my mother in the garden. She handed me a cup of tea. After a long, comfortable silence, she said, "Sometimes love isn't enough, Claire. Sometimes staying hurts more than leaving." Her simple words echoed in my mind all night. Later, I called him. "We can't fix this," I said. "I'm not coming back. I've had enough." "You're making a mistake," he warned. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'm done making the same one over and over again." He didn't reply. I never expected him to beg. I started looking for a small apartment. I couldn't go back to that house, a place haunted by too many painful memories. I found a small room with a window that looked out onto a busy street. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I moved in a week later, taking only my clothes, some books, and a few photos of my family. I left behind everything that reminded me of him. The first few nights were difficult. The silence was overwhelming, but it was a peaceful silence, not the sharp-edged silence that had filled our home. This silence was soft and healing. Slowly, I began to find my footing again. I started reading more. I cooked simple meals for myself. I took pride in keeping my little room clean. I called my mother every night. I went for long walks in the park. I started to feel like myself again, a person I hadn't recognized for a long time. I still thought about Ethan sometimes, not with anger, but with a quiet sadness. I had given him so many chances, but he didn't want to change. He didn't care enough to try, and I had to admit my own mistake. I had stayed too long. I had believed that my love alone could fix a broken man. Now I knew that some people never learn from their mistakes, and some people never stop making the same one. I had been both, but not anymore. Now I was learning, slowly and quietly. I was learning to love myself more than the ghost of a man who couldn't love me back. I was learning to live for myself. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, I would never go back.